What's up, everyone? This is Randall Warnas, and I'm with Kyle Miller, and I am trying to share my screen. I'm not sure what you guys are seeing. Hold on. Looks like it's good. Okay, yeah, we'll get started with the webinar in about 3 minutes. We generally start about a minute after the hour so people can come in. But thanks for being here early. Thanks for taking part in this webinar about the Mavic 3 Enterprise. I'm grateful to have Kyle here from DJI to do so. So again, we'll get started in a few minutes. So just sit tight, grab your popcorn, grab a drink, and make sure to throw your questions in as well. Actually, someone sent me a question in via email. And that's great. I'll make sure that we cover that. But also, if you have any additional questions, go to the question button or bar within your panel and just put all your questions there. You could put them in now. You can put them in throughout the presentation. We'll get to those at the end. So we'll get started in a few minutes. All right, it's the top of the hour. Again, we're going to get started in 1 minute. Just to make sure, so I know what you're seeing, you should be seeing a deck that says Enterprise UAS DJI Mavic 3 webinar, and you also see Kyle and I through video, right? Could someone just confirm that either through chat or through the questions? That is what you see. Okay, so you see a deck and you also see us. Look at all these people responding. Fantastic. I appreciate you guys. Just want to make sure, because I think Kyle's going to be holding up some stuff illustratively at some point just to talk about the product. If Kyle, I don't want to speak for you. I think that's what you said. Cool. Well, yeah, we'll get started in just a few seconds. Again, thanks for being here. Thanks for throwing some stuff into the question and answer space and confirming that. All right. And if I'm looking over here, this is the screen that has Kyle's face and your questions and stuff. So I apologize. I'm going to try to give you guys focus throughout the presentation, but I got other things going on. All right. Well, we're a minute after the hour. Looks like we got a good number of folks in here, and I'm sure some will be trickling in. Keep in mind, as most of the webinars that we do, they are recorded. We will post those at some point so that you can revisit this content in the future. But it's great to have people here live, not only so that we feel like we're doing something and we know there are people actually paying attention to the information we're given, but also that you're here for the question and answer portion, which lets us know what we're not clear about and what isn't clear, what's put out into the market about the product. So, you know, obviously in the world of plenty of webinars, thank you for being a part of this one. Having Kyle, who has been, I don't know, we've known each other since I think 2016, and worked together in the drone industry in various capacities since. Grateful to have Kyle here. So we'll do a little introduction. Again, throw your questions into the question and answer spot, and we'll do that at the end. Pat, you just asked that question. We will have question and answer at the end, and this is recorded. So Kyle, first you want to give a little bit about your background, because I think not only being at DJI, but just the wealth of experience and places that you've been is really interesting to the conversation. Do you want to just give a little rundown on that?
Sure thing. You hear me well, Randall?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Randall, for joining, being able to add me onto the webinar. I'm always happy to be able to help support Enterprise UAS and DSLRPros. So a little bit about my background real briefly. I'm based in Eastern Iowa, born and raised here. My first drone job was back in 2014 and 2015 in the agriculture drone industry, so kind of a different sector than a lot of people have seen or come up in, building fixed wing platforms that you see in the back there. That was kind of the industry back in 2014 and 2015. I transferred over to Drone Deploy in early 2017, spent about 5 years there. and made a couple skips and hops and ended up at DJI. This is month 9, I believe. So starting to get the things down quite a bit, but it's been a really big year for DJI. I couldn't be happier to join now, especially with the products that we have released this year, one of them being the Mavic 3 Enterprise. But yeah, my background is definitely agriculture, as well as high accuracy surveying, construction, just general survey work.
Perfect. And like we met at Farm Progress back in 2016, I think is our first introduction. And I know you as being kind of like an ag guy, a surveying guy. And so what we're going to talk about today is largely going to be, focused on that. I'm going to take some of the thermal stuff because of my background, and that's kind of how this will look. I do want to give a quick, take the opportunity to explain what Enterprise UAS is and why you see multiple brands that are attached to me or attached to webinars like this. Enterprise UAS is kind of a holding company of multiple reseller brands that existed before Enterprise UAS was a thing. So DSLRPros was the first, Dronefly was the second, Aerial Media Pros was the third, and then we recently acquired Empire RC. So we have multiple brands that function and are active regularly, but it's all pretty much the same team under Enterprise UAS. So I think that we, as a value-added reseller, we hold this space of educating the market, as unbiased as we can be. Obviously, we talk a lot about the products we have access to and the ones that we can put in your hands as customers, but we also take a lot of time to get in depth with the OEMs, understand, their roadmaps, understand what is adding value to our customers, and that's why webinars like this allow us to express those things of what's important to us and give exposure to brands like DJI, not that they need it, to our customers of what kind of product development advancements are being made. So today, primarily, we're talking about the Mavic 3 Enterprise. When we first initiated the conversation about doing this, the Mavic 3 multispectral was not yet released. It's not really part of the deck, but I know that it's really your baby as far as drones go, and you recently did a webinar on it. So know that we can answer questions about Mavic 3 multispectral. Kyle is an expert with the product, but there's not going to be slides that really talk about it too much. So if you have questions about multispectral that we're not covering, please throw those in there. But obviously, just kind of starting on the Mavic series, DJI has kind of parsed out enterprise drones as in juxtaposition to consumer products. So there's a Mavic 3 and there's a Mavic 3 Enterprise. What kind of makes those different products in your mind?
That is a great question, and it's something that we haven't necessarily done a great job differentiating before. You look at the Matrice line of drones, it makes sense, but when you get into the consumer and prosumer side, a lot of people are using a Mavic Pro, a Mavic 2 Pro, a Phantom 4 Pro, which they had aspects of them that were enterprise, but the drone wasn't completely thought of from a commercial or enterprise use case. It was really thought of, how can it make good videos? How can it be a consumer product? And then how can we tailor that into the specific industries? So I'd say this is the first budget level drone that DJI has released that is that industry standard as far as the commercial space for really being thought of to actually tackle the job sites rather than being the all-arounder type drone. And that's why we're on the enterprise team extremely excited about this new product.
Yeah, and I think that there's also one thing that is really important about to point out, and maybe this is kind of behind the scenes stuff, is that DJI being 85% of the drone marketplace. Let's say that, and there might be variances in that number, but let's just say that that's what it is. DJI has no real way to measure how much of that is commercial versus how much of that is consumer based off of the products. If you were buying a Phantom 4 Pro, you could have been buying it like me. I flew my Phantom 4 Pro mostly for going on vacations and things like that, but they were used a lot in surveying and mapping. And by product, you wouldn't know what the use case is. And DJI isn't, taking full account of who the user is on the back end. And so for us to really define what the opportunity is and what the growth is for industrial drones, they really need to be differentiated by product rather than guessing which users are using what. And maybe that's a
Yeah,
statement, but it's
no,
an
that
interesting problem that we have is we really don't know what the market looks like because before it was kind of like one size fits all. And Inspire One was the first drone carrying a thermal payload, but the Inspire One itself was a prosumer product.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
and I would totally agree that it seems like we checked some boxes because we knew users were using drones for enterprise. We just weren't able to check all of the boxes for the correct price point, which I feel like that we really have done here and been able to differentiate that enterprise product compared to the prosumer.
right. And
So
the last thing I
one of
want to
those
talk about
biggest
here is,
differentiators is the SDK, which we'll dive into. Sorry about
yeah,
that,
for
Randall.
sure. The SDK is a huge differentiator. And one other thing I wanted to touch on this is flight time. So being back in the drone industry with the Phantom One, which I have one of them behind me, flight time was like 10 minutes, maybe. With the Phantom 2, you were maybe getting 13. And it was always like, well, when are we going to see a drone that gets 30? And then once you hit 30, it's like, when are you going to see a drone that does an hour? With 45 minutes of flight time, are you finding the feedback that you're getting from industry that it is like beyond enough to get the job done?
Well, everyone would always like more,
Right.
but at this point, it really does feel that way. It's checking, 95% of the flights we've done. We do have ways of continuing missions and things like that to get those large job sites. But when you look at that 45 minutes of flight time and you look at the previous versions of drones we had, 28 minutes on the Phantom 4 Pro, I believe it was, which was groundbreaking. So you'd plan your missions for 20 minutes, and that's about what you would be able to get. Now we're planning missions of 30 to 35 minutes, getting an additional 50% of flight time during missions. It just makes going out and surveying those sites that are about sub 120, 160 acres, just one battery, pretty easy. And even sites that are larger than that, you grab a case that's this small and you can cram 5-6 batteries in here with the 100-watt smart charger that should be able to keep it going. And we've got really fast recharge rates on these Mavic 3 Enterprise batteries. So being able to have that 45 minutes of flight time, keep flying, being able to make surveys of 30, 35 minutes plus, it is kind of what the industry has been asking for and why I'm just really excited for 2023.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about what makes the Mavic 3 Enterprise series do what it's supposed to do, which is really data capture. So we have 3 variants here: the Mavic 3 Enterprise, Mavic 3 Thermal, which I guess is it Mavic 3 Enterprise Thermal or Mavic 3 Thermal, and that's enough.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're just referring it to as the Mavic 3 Thermal, but really when you look at it, it's the Mavic 3 Enterprise Suite. So you can just go mapping, thermal, or multispectral.
Gotcha. And then the multispectral at the end. And then the last one, the last image on this has an RTK module, but that RTK module is applicable to all 3, correct?
Exactly. These are enterprise drones. So whether you need positioning, obviously for Mavic 3 Enterprise, for general mapping, that's going to be important. Not just flight, but also triggering the imagery and saving the imagery with millisecond time sync so that everything is RTK added, as well as the Mavic 3 Thermal, because we know a lot of users are wanting to have that accuracy there too.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the imagery, especially the RGB imagery. When we look at the multispectral and thermal, one has thermal, one has multispectral. But what is the RGB cameras that go along the series? And someone asked me recently, like, is the multispectral camera the same camera that's on the Enterprise? And one of the cameras could be, but I want to get that clarity. Like, what is similar to all of them and what sets them apart?
Yes, that's a great question. So all of these drones, the Mavic 3 Enterprise series, have fixed sensors. So what you get, what you see here is what you get. But now, rather than the Phantom line being one purpose, one camera, or the Mavic line even, now with the Mavic 3 having multiple sensors, they can cover multiple different use cases. So the Mavic 3 Enterprise, the main mapping sensor that we have there, we went from an industry standard 1-inch to now our new industry standard 4/3 inch sensor. Essentially a larger sensor means way more dynamic range than you were seeing before. So think parking lot inspection, you get really bright and sunny reflectivity, and then you see shadows being cast by the building. Being able to see into those shadows very clearly and being able to still generate a really good orthomosaic and 3D model. So it's 20 megapixels. We're looking at, reaching GSDs of sub-centimeters, even at hundreds of feet up, because we're getting a really, really good image. And then obviously mechanical shutter. If we're talking mapping, we're talking about the Phantom 4 Pro and the Phantom 4 RTK replacement, we need to have some sort of mechanical shutter for accuracy purpose, which we were able to do. And it's really the only drone out there, especially at this price point, with that large of a sensor with a mechanical shutter and the GSD it's getting. But the nice side is you do get that telezoom camera on top. So instead of having to choose mapping or inspection, you can do both with the typical Mavic 3 Enterprise. I know I'm rambling here a bit, but if we do jump down to the multispectral, we've got a lot of customers that they don't need the drone as much for inspection, but they do need it for environmental impacts, not just for precision agriculture. So we need both spatial resolution and accuracy with the visible camera and spectral accuracy with multispectral. And we weren't seeing that with the Phantom 4 multispectral having a low, not a great visual camera. And so we combined those two to make a Mavic 3 multispectral that can map just as well as a Mavic 3 Enterprise, and then also capture those other vegetation indices.
One thing that you mentioned on your webinar is that you guys dropped the blue band, so it's only a 4-band instead of a 5-band. Can you explain why that decision was made, and really what someone might be missing out on, or really they were never missing by having a blue band?
Yeah, that's a good question. Every analysis is different and every crop is different. So we don't want to say that there aren't use cases for capturing the blue band very accurately. There can be. We just found the majority of users were focusing on green, red, near infrared, and red edge for having the largest amount of discrepancy between a healthy plant and a stressed plant or a dead plant. You really only need red and near infrared for calculating NDVI and some other indices. You really don't need the blue band. But what it's doing by taking out the blue band, we now have room on that payload for that large sensor. So like the Phantom 4 multispectral, we captured every band, but we're looking at 2 megapixel sensors. And now you can have this giant sensor capturing 20 megapixel imagery that you can then overlay with multispectral. So not just in agriculture, we've got a lot of environmental remediation, oil and gas, telecommunications, just a lot of even railway that's going to be very important.
Perfect. Anything else you want to say on payloads before we move forward?
Yeah, and the only other one there, Mavic 3 Thermal, I will let you cover that, but it's got a couple different sensors on there capturing your high resolution thermal, and the price point on that bad boy is nuts.
Yeah, for what you're getting, thermal has been democratized by things like this, where now it is within a price point which is reachable for most people that need it. But yeah, we'll talk on the thermal specs later. We have specific slides on that. All right, so let's talk about the RC, because I think that in the drone industry, you have a wide range of professionalism as well as versatility with the RC. I have never used the RC Pro Enterprise, and I think it's quite a large, cumbersome name. But we'll talk about like what makes the controller special, whether you're able to put third-party apps on it, because I've used a lot of RCs that are particularly just not user-friendly.
Yeah, and you can see all the stats on the slide deck, but honestly, my opinion about it, I know that we're focusing on a smart controller here with an embedded display. We did have platforms previously that was a non-smart controller that had an iPad or an Android device that you would hook up to. If you think price point and flexibility, I've really come around to the idea of having a screen embedded, something that no one can call, no one can ping, no one can interrupt, and you don't have a tablet dying in the field while the drone is potentially still flying. And so there were a lot of aspects of having an iPad that were really difficult, where having a dedicated screen that doesn't overheat like you see with iPads and some Android tablets, it has a much larger peak net brightness that is going to be able to see a lot easier in those bright sun. It's for what the package is, including a drone, RTK module, and a smart controller, it is just next level. But the one other aspect, if you look at just the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Enterprise, the two controllers, so the Enterprise controller has a speaker. So when you look at attaching the speaker to the drone, you're going to be able to actually communicate between drone controller and the speaker. And then also you have mini HDMI out. So if you are looking to get more eyes visible on the screen, public safety perspective, and being able to have every police officer being able to analyze and view the screen is going to be important. So there's some nice features there on the RC Pro Enterprise, but I am pretty excited about having a dedicated controller with a screen with SDK support, so you can load Drone Deploy, Sky Browse, and then some other apps on there at a later date, UCGS, Pix4D, things like that.
The last thing I want to touch on here is that I'm guessing O3, because this is what I read on sites and stuff, is OcuSync 3, I would assume. So
Yep.
O3 Enterprise, OcuSync 3 Enterprise for greater range. DJI has been blowing people's minds with the amount of connectivity, the reliability of the connectivity of the drone. What is the spec? Do you know the spec on range for the Mavic 3 Enterprise series? And maybe we cover it later, but
that is something I absolutely should memorize. I believe what we recommend or what we say or promote is 15-kilometer range. In really noisy environments, you may not be able to get that. But like you said, I mean, DJI, are we actually a drone company, or are we a sensor company, or are we a transmission company? Because it seems like we do all three of those things really well, and it requires all three of those things to make a good drone platform.
Yeah, for sure. It's just when you do butt up other drones against that range and the reliability is one of those things that it's like you look at price point, look at quality of componentry, quality of imagery, and then this range is unbelievable. But I just didn't remember what it was. All right. So also, many drones are missing things that DJI has been putting in for a long time, which is obstacle avoidance sensors and things like that. Is there anything to this that is different than airframes from in the past as far as obstacle avoidance and collision avoidance sensors?
Sure, it's the great question. It's the next version of our obstacle avoidance. It's also the next version of APAS, where it's going to be able to make smart decisions, whether it's trying to return home in a really hard environment. We do have a couple different types of sensors around the drone. So we have vision sensors to be able to help out with obstacle avoidance. We also have radar sensors. So if you're trying to fly at night and you need obstacle avoidance, at least some, or in low lit environments, which happens pretty often, you're going to be able to rely on those sensors as well. And then you can see a little bit of stats about data security, but as far as obstacle avoidance goes, it has sensors all 6 directions of this drone to be able to avoid obstacles for you.
And I put this data security stuff on here just because it's kind of safety related, and I won't force you to say much about it, even though it's the company you represent. But I think that a lot is made about DJI, data security, connections to China, all that stuff. One thing that I want everyone here to know, and this is coming from me, someone that's worked at DJI, someone that's also worked for large US companies, and I feel like I have something to gain and to lose by being right or wrong, is that DJI, without a doubt, has spent more money to validate, to audit, and to secure data. Yes, DJI is a Chinese company, but I'm just saying that you could look at other drones on the market and they haven't gone through this length to protect your data. And I think that there's a lot of geopolitics that come into play in the drone space, in which detracts and distracts from quality componentry. And I just want to remind that when a company in the United States claims that their data is secure just because they're based in the United States, there's hundreds or thousands of breaches of data that are on AWS servers based in the US. And I think that it's a very narrow-minded way to look at the drone industry, country of origin, and thinking that DJI is the enemy, when DJI has done more to protect your data than any other drone manufacturer. And I could say that claim confidently. Is there anything else we want to add to that, or should we just jump to the next thing?
Thanks for covering it. The only thing I got to add is there's a complete offline mode. If you do not want this drone to touch and ping anything, not that it does, and we've spent, like you said, the most amount of money that anyone has to make sure those claims are right, you can operate this thing completely offline. That's fine.
Right, exactly. Okay, cool. All right, so I put together these slides. These were somewhere in the materials, and I thought it was interesting to look at kind of what used to be the standard and what has become the standard. So this is comparing the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced to the Mavic 3 Thermal. So yeah, the thermal elements are also negotiated here, but really we're looking at just the airframe comparing the Mavic 2 Enterprise version to a Mavic 3. DJI had highlighted these areas as the key differences between the two. So I just want to point those out and see if there's anything that's interesting. You mentioned the 15-kilometer transmission range, which is correct. So it goes from 10 kilometer to 15. Flight time from 31 to 45 is incredible. Wind resistance. So I actually have a customer, and we've had conversations about their worry moving from a Phantom airframe, Phantom 4, to Mavic 3, because they were worried about the wind resistance being a lighter aircraft. Is there anything that you found with the Mavic 3 as far as wind that is unacceptable or performs less than other drones?
I honestly haven't. On launch day, we flew a Mavic 3 Enterprise in Miami in a hurricane, and anyone that was at the demo can justify that it was wet everywhere and windy and gusty, and so I haven't. Also, feel free to check out my LinkedIn page. I just posted a video of a Mavic 3 flying in a blizzard, and it's remarkable. I mean, 30+ mile-an-hour winds. I will say this, pretty matter-of-fact statement, there really is no drone manufacturer out there that's touching what we can do with wind resistance. Phantom to Mavic, though, it's pretty close. I'm still picking my Mavic 3. Once it's up there, it can handle and make adjustments so fast that I've no problem with gusts pushing 30.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to know on that front. And then the second page of this talks a little bit more about the sensors. So I guess the visual camera sensor, where they're comparing that, the second red note down, I guess this is just saying that there's two sensors on board so that you can have that wide field of view as well as a narrow field of view for zoom. Is that correct?
Yeah, we wanted the Mavic 3 Thermal to be a true inspection drone, where the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced only having digital zoom, trying to track onto things, we were losing quite a bit of resolution. So now having a hybrid 56x telezoom with that, and I've got another video on my LinkedIn page highlighting zooming in all the way to 56x. It just makes inspections way more easy. Once again, you'd think this is a $15,000 drone with the wide, the zoom, and the thermal all working together.
So it mentions the 48 megapixel on the wide and the 12 on the telephoto. Are you only capturing 12 megapixel imagery when you are taking zoomed in photos? Is that when the actual image will be 12 megapixels?
You should be able to turn on which sensors that you would like to be triggering when you're manually flying. When you are doing an automated capture, it would just be the wide and the thermal.
Okay. Well, that covers it.
You can trigger all three.
Anyone in here has, what was that?
You can trigger all three of the sensors at the same time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So software. This is an interesting thing because I think that where DJI has tried to create software in which is fully compatible and integrated within their own products, but many people are using third-party stuff. So can we talk about what apps, like for instance, the DJI Terra, you have been in many privileged places in which you know a lot about photogrammetry software and you know the pros and cons of other software developers. For Terra, is it particularly good or leading in any of these things, or is it kind of like an introductory thing? How does DJI really position Terra as a modeling surveying platform?
Sure. So how we position Terra is we wanted to have a all-in-one solution, so something that isn't just hardware and then you got to go find the software that you want to be able to process. We want to be able to offer that for you as well, so you can go from mission planning with Pilot 2, flying the drone with Pilot 2, capturing the data, and then being able to kick it over to an engine so you have outputs rather than having to necessarily rely on the drone deploys and the Pix4Ds and the Agisofts. But all of our data is just tagged, and so you can dump it to whichever platform you want. I will say, using a lot of different platforms out there, I've got a lot of friends that drone deploy, so it's not like I'm hating on anything, but when it comes to 3D modeling, it really seems like Terra is about the closest when you look at Bentley context capture. That's kind of the industry standard or the gold standard as far as 3D model reconstruction. Terra seems to be right up there with them. When it comes to 2D orthomosaics, we do have a really good tool to be able to build that. And that's more in the Pix4D and the drone deploy line, being able to build really good, really large orthomosaics. We're happy to take that on too at Terra. But when it comes to vertical and 3D, I would at this point just put Terra up against nearly anything, and the ease of use and the price, especially when you compare it to context capture, it blows that part out of the water too. Hit like 4 buttons and you process rather than needing a bunch of different software. So I really enjoy Terra. It's also a solution that's only on desktop. So if you do need to be able to process data real time at the field's edge without having to upload to the cloud, that has that option as well.
Gotcha. And there's this 3-month license that's included, and I didn't dig in deep enough. Is this for Mavic 3 Enterprise only, or is this for multispectral and thermal as well that you get that license?
You do get, I think it's mainly just with the multispectral. That's a little bit fuzzy as far as we're having that, but then we're not having as much of the DJI Care unless you would purchase that. If you are interested in trying Terra at any point, I can't guarantee 3 months, but feel free to reach out to Randall or I, and we'll be able to get something on there so that you can start processing your data in Terra and at least try it out.
Sounds good. And then Flight Hub, if you don't know what Flight Hub is, that would take a while for us to explain it, but basically it's going to be all sorts of like fleet management, data management. Is there anything mission planning? Anything else we're missing on that front that we'd want to talk about?
Live streaming, and it's a lot more focused on public safety, search and rescue.
Yeah. So if you have questions about Flight Hub, holler. And then the thermal analysis tool, DJI has been putting their own thermal sensors on products for the last few years, and to be able to tune the imagery after capture, that's what the analysis tool is for. I've never used it, but I know quite a bit about thermal analysis tools in general. So maybe there's some things that could be done on that as far as maybe a future webinar or another discussion. But if you have questions about that, DJI does have their own tool for that if you are interested on the thermal side of things. Okay, so these slides talking about use cases are always kind of like, yeah, you could use a drone for anything. And we could list all the use cases that are real and not real, or common and not common. You know, there's plenty of stuff being done with drones at this point that it doesn't need to be said. But the Mavic 3 Enterprise series, if you take all 3 of them, can pretty much do anything in the industrial space. The only thing maybe not is like confined space inspection. Is there anything that you think, I mean, it's a weird question to ask, but that it can't do, or that you wouldn't recommend it being used for?
I mean, the only things that I would recommend, we probably already have a product to be able to help that, like the Avata or the FPV, or a Mini 2 or a Mini 3, being able to get in those small confined spaces. But other than that, for 95+% of the use cases and the jobs out there, we should be able to do it with the Mavic 3 Enterprise.
Perfect. All right, so this came out of a deck that DJI had put together about kind of the benefits of using drone technology for surveying and mapping. And I don't know how familiar you personally are with this slide, but you have seen how people are using drones in this space. So do you want to talk a little bit about like why drones are and how, to what degree drones are taking over that industry and replacing traditional methods?
Sure. And it's something that I feel like we have been talking about for a number of years. The only difference is that we see the number keep every year, keep ticking up and up and up further on the amount of drone usage, especially when you look at the platforms that have like DJI Dock, being able to take something completely autonomous. That's another lever that's going to be able to help catapult the usage and adoption much higher. I would also say the price point for what the use case is of having high accuracy mapping, high accuracy thermal, high accuracy multispectral, a lot of those are helping it get more adoption as well. So what we're using drones for in the survey world, obviously we're going to improve the efficiency. When you're capturing with the drone compared to capturing on the ground, typically you're going to get more data sources and more data points unless you're laser scanning, but you need to move that base around quite a bit. So the efficiency wise, you're getting much more data and much more refined data at a reduced cost. Imagine how long it can take to go out and survey a very large site, especially when we're looking at earthworks where they can be 100+ acres in size. That can take a long time, whereas it would take only one flight with the drone. Enhanced safety. We've got a lot of different safety factors to be able to make sure that our drones fly well all the time, redundancies on sensors, as well as just being in this space for so long now and using obstacle avoidance and RTK, being able to just help the safety on the job site, even when it comes to outputs and understanding where is a safe environment. And then all the data that you're getting out of it, 2D maps, elevation, topography, 3D models, LiDAR point clouds, and we look at the Matrice 300 series, there can be so much incredible value that drones can bring, especially for the price point.
So to me, in the drone space, when we talk about solar inspection, it's pretty much an industry standard that it's done by drones. If you're in solar and not using drones, like, you are likely leaving money on the table. You're just doing things in a way. It's like riding a horse and buggy across country. It's why do it if you have another option? Is surveying and mapping getting to that point in which it's like every surveying organization is using drones, or are there some that are hesitant or dragging their feet to turn over to this new way of capturing the data?
Yeah, another good question. And it seems like just depending on the territory, depending on who is using it and who isn't, you can see one client, one company within one city, as they start utilizing drones, it seems like the other adopter or the same other companies within the same city are looking to adopt. There really haven't been a whole lot of technologies out there that are going to be doing that scanning for you other than drones. And so that's another reason why the adoption is going so much higher. I mean, you have your traditional base stations. The base stations are getting much more accurate and getting much more density. But beyond that, it does seem like the technology is stagnated a bit, getting those sensors up in the air, flying over the job site. It isn't quite as crazy as adoption for solar panel inspection. That makes so much sense, but we're not far behind, and construction seems to be one of those biggest drone industries.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. These are animated slides. All right. So this is just another way to illustrate that. I know that Nikhil from Raptor Maps a long time ago said to me, that inspection of solar panels is 6 to 10 times faster with a drone than it is traditional methods. And that has always stuck with me. And that's why I talk about solar as basically like drones are in solar without a question. With surveying, looking at data like this, being able to compare time and looking at savings, these are the kind of snapshots that really help you make justifications to your buyers, to executive teams within organizations. They want something quantifiable. So is there anything about this that rings true? Or, I mean, is there anything about these numbers that you want to add any color to?
Sure. So I would say the biggest reason why we bring up this slide is because of scalability. Honestly, if it's taking the same amount of time or close to it as traditional surveying methods, but the outputs are better, we're still going to be seeing adoption because of those outputs. And we do believe that the outputs are better. But when we see such an improvement both on outputs and on time to implement that survey, That's where you go from, just one drone program doing 1 or 2 sites, that's easily doable, to all of a sudden it's on every single site because of the sheer amount of time savings. Personally, like, I love the time saving stats. I'm more of a data head, and so if the data is better, I'm probably going to do it as long as it doesn't take much longer. But this is scalable. When you all of a sudden cut your time down by 8x, essentially your price down by 8x too.
Right. Use cases, I mean, like, this is primarily what AEC is using drones for. I don't think we need to like harp on it too much. I've done things in the past where it's like public safety and how they're using drones, and it's like, what are they not using drones for? And you can list them all, but there's the point is that drones are so versatile that even when we're talking about industries, then you could break it down into specific mission types, and the possibilities are endless. And I think that I used Dr. Ian Kerr, who did Snotbot, and also did FleerBot, who was getting temperature readings and collecting snot samples from whales with drones. That it's like, how do you list that as a use case? It's within wildlife and conservation, but it's also like you're collecting whale snot in a petri dish. And so just it takes the imagination of anyone within these industries that knows the problem to solve, that puts a drone out there to do so. I'm sure you've seen a ton of really interesting stuff over your years in the drone industry. Anything else you want to add to this?
Sure. I mean, it's dozens of new use cases for drones are getting looked at every day. Coming from the ag industry, of course, there was that easy use case of, I want to be able to fly my field and know where the problem areas are. But then you get the really wacky questions, being able to fly over and understand where all of my cattle are, being able to count all of the hay bales that are out there that I need to go collect. Like, until you're really enveloped into the industry, it seems like the people that can just keep coming up with, oh, hey, this would be a perfect use case to having a flying gimbalized camera, because that's essentially what we're trying to commoditize here. Specifically within the construction industry, it does seem like, Earthworks was that first easy check mark, because we can create elevation models pretty easily, even back in 2015-16. But now, as we focus on building vertically and getting those as applied and building better 3D models and being able to capture better 3D models, that has really progressed over the past couple of years, going from Earthworks to covering the entire job site timeline.
Right. Yeah, and I remember when I first heard the use case of like watching concrete cooling before that they build the next layer, they'll just fly above with thermal imaging and make sure that it's cured. But there was no other way to really get that information. Somebody would just kind of eye check it or
walk around with a thermometer and try to poke it in. Yeah.
Exactly. And so like these are things that you don't really think about, but I remember it was a guy from Cemex. I was doing some stuff with 3DR at the time, and like that was now in my brain. Construction starts at the foundation, and they're already using drones from the earthworks and preparing the land to the first time that they're laying the foundation of that building, all the way up till it's finished, until completion. And so drones are on job sites all the time. And I think that unless you're in the construction space, you don't see them because you're not hanging around places in which these sites are going, or these buildings are going up. But know that this is just another place where drones are instrumental and irreplaceable at this point in the workspace.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked about this. This is kind of like your stuff. I want to say, what about Mavic 3 Enterprise is special when it comes to surveying? Like, what are the features that are on board that allow you to do the job better? And these are the ones that you threw out there. So I'm going to give you full space to speak to them and why you find these particular things so important.
For sure. So starting off with flight time or flight endurance, being able to cover 80 acres of battery at 1 centimeter per pixel GSD. So obviously we can fly much more. If we're looking at US regulations, I've been able to fly, 160 acres, potentially more, pushing up to that 200 acres on a single flight at 400 feet. And you're still looking at GSD of 2 centimeters or below. So that just talks about the quality of our sensor that we're able to get that GSD, and then also the flight time and endurance to cover those very large sites. And one way to get that resolution is having a very large sensor capturing 20 megapixels, which seems like it's the industry standard now. I did talk a bit more about what a larger sensor can do over that 1-inch Phantom 4 Pro, being able to have way more dynamic range and flying in even tougher environments. Obviously, we have to have a mechanical shutter. That's when we released the Phantom 4 Pro, and then we released the Mavic 2 Pro. Even the Mavic Pro, people were asking, where's the mechanical shutter? Like, that's the only thing we needed to make this drone a commercial drone, was just to add a mechanical instead of a rolling shutter. And so now having that mechanical shutter on that new industry standard, so that when you are making high accuracy survey maps, you're capturing the entire image like that, rather than a rolling shutter capturing it over the course of milliseconds. So we're getting accurate imagery as well as fast imagery. And this isn't necessarily a bullet point there, but I did see it earlier on the slide deck, having a 0.7 second capture speed. So compare that to the Phantom line being around 2 seconds. That means that we are able to fly the drone up to 2 times faster than before, capturing the same mechanical shutter imagery. It's just, since we're able to save and rewrite and re-trigger the camera much faster, now we're flying missions. You can obviously slow this down if you want to, but we're capturing good imagery. You're flying a mission at 80 feet, the drone still may fly 25, 30 mile an hour and capture that site in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. And so as you're cranking through, sure, we can fly longer, we can fly faster too, and capture better imagery, and we can all fly all day with minimal equipment. I brought it up here just a moment ago, but you have, a hard shell case that comes with the smart controller, a drone. So if you were to compare this against other previous versions, you would also have to expense an iPad or an Android device in there, because you get the smart controller. You can fit 5 different batteries up on the side. You can get the 100-watt charger that's going to be able to charge your tablet or the smart controller and a battery at the same time. You get that battery hub in there, all for a really slick price of less than $3,500. Like that is setting the new industry standard for being able to take a Pelican case, literally throw it in the back seat of an economy car. You can almost ride with it on a motorcycle to these different job sites and be able to just fly all day and capture some of the best imagery that you've seen, next to a Matrice 300 and P1, which is 6x the price.
Yeah, you mentioned the iPad and that you don't have to buy that. Also, it used to be like you'd buy a DJI product, but then you would end up buying like a GPC case or a Pelican case or something like that.
Yep.
Or now it comes in a case that is suitable for the job site, which I think is also a significant savings, and it has places for all the batteries and for like the actual user, which was an evolution of DJI over time. I do have one question, and I was in the thermal space for a long time, and I am not as active of a drone user as I should be. So there's rolling shutter and there's mechanical shutter. What is global shutter, and where does it fit?
We've got 14 minutes left, Randall. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Is it a different thing?
Yeah, global shutter much more closely aligns with a mechanical type shutter than a rolling shutter, where you are capturing all of the pixels at near this almost immediate same time. You're getting that mechanical shutter, you're getting that shutter to close, and it's capturing it from pixel 1 all the way in the final bottom right corner at the same exact time, whereas rolling shutter is kind of gathering each pixel or one line at a time, and so we do have some distortion at the bottom of your imagery.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between global and mechanical, mechanical is going to be closer to that typical CMOS. I hate to even show it because I'm using it as a webcam, but I'm using a DSLR camera. A lot of the DSLR sensors that people are mainly using all are more mechanical rather than global.
Okay, just sometimes people almost use them interchangeably, and it's like, is it a global shutter? It's a mechanical shutter, and I never feel like I can answer that question confidently, so I just thought of it and I threw it to my guy that I was hoping could shed some light on.
Yeah, sorry about that. I will say this. There really isn't a better between global and mechanical. It just kind of depends on what the use case is. A lot of the technology is a bit the same. They're both better than rolling, but there are reasons why you'd use a mechanical, and there are reasons why you could use a global and get away with it.
Fair enough. I'll take it. I did want to touch on thermal. This was my world for a long time, and this isn't a thermal 101 thing. On this video, you're just going to see some thermal zoom, and I think that it illustrates like how you can hold in position and really get to see small componentry here on a power pole. But when we're talking about thermal, you're obviously able to see things that have a different temperature. But you're also able to measure that temperature, and these are all radiometric cameras that FLIR is putting on airframes these days. And I just wanted to point out, like, there's some people that are not super comfortable with thermal. I have been riding the back of thermal since December of 2015 in the drone space, and so if you have deeper questions on what you can do with thermal, please reach out. But when people see images like this, they look at the color palette and it's recognizable as thermal, or there's also black hot, white hot, things like that. Just know a few things: that not every palette is created equally. There's different use cases for different palettes. So when you're looking for people, you don't use this palette, you use white hot or black hot. When you're doing inspections like this, where there's going to be a large variance in the temperature, or the delta T, which is listed on the side, then you can use high visibility, high contrast color palettes like this. You don't just go fly a thermal camera and expect you're going to get really good data on the first day if you haven't been trained. And so there is some things to know. Know that if you, like I said, if you have questions, I'm happy to walk you through what I do know. But the use cases, like we mentioned with drones in general, the use cases for thermal are almost endless. Public safety, solar inspection, utility inspection, wildlife applications, water conservation. There's tons. And so just don't think that whatever you have narrowed the use cases for thermal in your mind to be, know that you're missing some, because they are like endless. And maybe we'll do some like more thermal webinar related stuff in the future, but I thought like I would touch on it a little bit here. And also, DJI has put in a ton of features to make thermal analysis and thermal flights easier. Spot meters are very basic. You're going to be able to see the temperature of any pixel within the image as you tap around. You can measure entire areas and look for the hottest points and the coldest points within that area. You're able to have an alarm go off if anything that the camera passes over is over a certain temperature, which would tell you have a hot spot or something like that. DJI has dug deep into making the most advanced thermal payloads for drones out there. And I have, like I said, been a part of that since the beginning. The Zenuse XT1 launched in December of 2015, and the evolution has been significant in miniaturizing and lowering the price and in packing this thing full of smart features. And so with the Mavic 3 thermal, you're getting everything that you were basically getting with a Zenuse XT2 plus more, and in such a smaller, compact body, and at a price point that's insane. So definitely look into it if you're looking to move your thermal fleet into something else. The transportability alone should make that desirable, because I've lugged an M200 and M300 around for quite a while, and it's, yeah, the data is pretty much on par. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to say about us, who we are, is we do kind of look through the whole cycle of drone program creation, from airframe to payloads to the training and software, and we support it all the way through. So if you do need anything, if you are looking to get more drones to your fleet, or just have questions, if you reach out to sales@DSLRPros.com, that gets to our team, and they will be happy to answer any questions that you have about drone technology. We obviously have access to everything we're talking about here, Mavic series on up to the Matrice series. So if you're looking for DJI stuff, we'd be happy to support you. But now is the best time of the entire webinar, in my mind, is Q&A, and a lot have come through. And please, if you have more questions, throw them into the question and answer box so we can answer those. But Kyle, I'm just going to go through these, pick out the ones that we can answer in 8 minutes, and we'll see if we could go longer. Okay. Does DJI Terra allow for exportable reports to clients?
That is a good question. It kind of depends on what you would define as a report. What do you want out of a report? Honestly, DJI Terra, I would see it more as a open-ended processing engine. So you're going to be able to get really good 2D and 3D outputs. We do have a quality and processing report so that you can understand how accurate your data and how the data processed. But if you are looking for specific types of reports, it does seem like what we don't want to get way too specific and spread our eggs way too thin. So we're allowing, and we have this ecosystem of straight up whole companies and hundreds of people that are getting employed just because they need to utilize our hardware to do a specific report. You look at Drone Deploy, you look at Raptor Maps, you look at Pix4D, especially Pix4D Fields. You know, a lot of those tools, if you're looking for a specific type of output, I will say there's probably a bit more with those third parties, but what Terra can do is very easily, make a better mesh, in my opinion, than pretty much anyone else at a great price point, so that once you get the output, you can run it through whatever analysis further you'd like to do.
Perfect. So something we did cover, but maybe needs to be stated in a different way, is someone asked, are all the payloads basically swappable? And I mean, I can answer the question. It's a very quick one. No. If you buy a Mavic 3 Enterprise, you're having that fixed dual RGB sensor, the 48 megapixel and the 20 megapixel. If you are buying the thermal, it is a fixed thermal sensor. If you're buying the multispectral, it's the fixed 4-band multispectral with the RGB camera. So they are not swappable. You are buying the edition that has the payload that you are looking for. Anything else you want to add to that, Kyle?
Yeah, all of the sensors on every 3 drone, they have more individual sensors on them, or larger sensors covering more use cases than the previous generation did. So the M3E can also do inspection with that telezoom rather than the P4P or the Mavic 2 Pro, just because it had one static sensor.
Right. I'm just going to keep cranking through these. I hope you don't mind. Somebody asked the bands on the multispectral. I think it was red, green, near infrared, and red edge, right?
Yep, and feel free to reach out to me, Kyle.Miller@DJI. You can see there if you need the specific wavelength and what our accuracy is capturing bands of light.
Perfect. Someone asked about the aftermarket floodlight accessory. So I know Fox Fury makes stuff, Loom Cube makes stuff. Has anyone done any accessorizing to the Mavic 3 Enterprise for floodlights?
Another good question. The only one that I know of, and there may be more out there, so I apologize if I step on some toes. I believe CZI does have their spotlight out. They are actively working on different payloads for the Mavic 3 Enterprise. We just came out with a speaker, but I believe you can start purchasing from CZI spotlight options.
That's right, CZI as well. My bad for leaving that one out.
No worries.
Okay. I'm jumping kind of later to the presentation. We'll work back up just because we were talking about different things later on. Someone asked, what is the best for ag crop survey? Mavic 3 multispectral or Matrice Matrice with the M30T? Which I think they're completely different things, but that was the question.
Yeah, I mean, we do have some in the ag space that are, no, we're coming up on time, that are using the optical zoom sensors on the M30 and the Matrice 300 and the H20T. If you need to be able to do individual plant analysis from 200, 100 feet up, there are tools. I think Tyrannus is potentially utilizing machine learning and AI and taking really high quality imagery. But if you're looking for plant health, if you're looking for mapping and modeling, it's really going to be that Mavic 3 multispectral. And a shout out here, if you are looking to train machine learning to be able to find weeds, pests, disease, something the ag industry is looking for ever since I've gotten into it in 2013 and 14, the Pix4D Smart tool, by being able to train your model on what it finds with all the different vegetation analysis and the bands that it's using, check out the Pix4D Fields Smart Tool. Just a quick plug for my bud, Nathan Stein.
Perfect. So here's a few questions about batteries. So someone asked, are the batteries hot swappable and are they self-heating? So two different questions, but about the batteries that I actually do not know the answers to. Kyle?
Oh no.
Did I
Am I
lose
here
you?
still?
I can hear
I think
you.
I think I'm good. You still see me?
I can see you and hear you.
Okay, perfect. I was pretty sure that I caught the majority of that question. Can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, so two different questions on batteries. One, are they hot swappable? And the other, are they self-heating?
No and no. If you are looking for heated batteries and hot swappable, that's more of that Matrice 30 M300. With the price point, no. I will say if you have Mavic 3 batteries, you're going to be able to use that in the Mavic 3 Enterprise because it's basically the same form factor of drone. But it has one battery, so unless you're really fast, you're not going to be able to hot swap it. And yeah, unfortunately it's not heated, but with proper battery maintenance, we have been able to fly below freezing.
Perfect. Someone asked, can you load DJI Fly on the controller? And I'm guessing so that you could operate other editions of airframes. That's a no, correct?
And that's correct. So that smart controller is really meant to fly with Pilot 2, and it's really meant to fly with the Mavic 3 Enterprise. And no, unfortunately, the Pro Plus controller isn't coming to the Mavic 3 Enterprise, at least at this point, maybe sometime long-term in the future, but we are focusing on the RC Pro Enterprise for this drone, flying with Pilot 2 or SDK with Drone Deploy or something like that.
Okay, so before we get into the last question, because we are up at time and I could do this all day, but what I'm going to promise to everyone here is that I will take every question. I will painstakingly type out the answer for everything that I do know. I'll ask Kyle for color on the things I don't know, and I'll send those out to everybody that's on here. We'll also send out the recording from this webinar, a link to it. We'll host it on YouTube somewhere, and so that you can watch this again and get all this information later. So know that I'll send that out. Give me 24 hours or so to get that uploaded and taken care of. So before the last question, I want to say thanks, Kyle. You're the man. I appreciate you. We're longtime pals, and I hope that goes on and on and on, and we're doing more of these webinars in the future. Thanks to everyone for being here. You have no idea that when we say, hey, do you want to do a webinar? That's the beginning of like the process, but there's a lot of work and coordination and stuff that goes into creating these. And it's all hoping that people show up and learn something. So whether it was waiting for the last 15 minutes to ask your question, and hopefully we get to all of those, or we were able to say something that either inspired you or answered that thing that's been itching at you or helped you make a better decision on your drone purchases. Like that's our objective. And so you being here, us being able to see a number of people sitting in here listening makes it so that it's like, okay, we did a good thing. So thank you for being here live and asking so many thoughtful questions. That was a long wrap up, but it's just there's endless appreciation from our end to you, just for you being here and moving this industry forward. To the last question, and it's not for any particular reason it's the last question, but it maybe allows you to flex some or add some additional knowledge to people. Someone's asking their recommended overlap for creating 3D models, and I'm guessing that these are just RGB 3D models, not anything too tricky, nothing thermal or whatever. Do you have best practices for doing modeling in general you want to share so that somebody could go out for their first time, maybe using Terra, and get something that they could be proud of on the 3D model side?
Sure, we can do you one better. I'll share a couple links that we can send on the follow-up. That'd be some great articles to read. If you are trying to make really good 3D reconstructions, I would say at minimum a 70% side lap. And with how fast the imagery captures with the Mavic 3 Enterprise, you can do 80% side lap. One other feature that we just released with the Mavic 3 Enterprise series of drones, so this covers all of them, is the option for Smart Oblique, which is actually controlling the camera's gimbal while it's flying. So rather than having to fly a bunch of different missions or only getting nadir imagery, it's going to fly it one way, capturing nadir, forwards, and actually somewhat backwards, and then it'll turn and do basically a crosshatch where it's doing 90 degrees opposite, and capturing at those 3 aspects as well. And so with that, you should be able to generate a really good 3D model. But I will say, if you want to make the best one, honestly, a lot of what I'll do is I'll add an extra orbit or 2 when the mission is done, just capturing manually. You can also just set it to time-lapse mode and capture every 0.7 seconds or 1 second or 2 seconds, and then all you have to worry about is flying. We get the obstacle avoidance sensors that are utilized there so that you don't hit anything and you're not running into anything while you're flying around the site. But I will add, if you want to make a really good model, sometimes it does take a little bit of manual flight, capturing a couple orbits, and honestly, it's a lot faster doing it that way. Just going bang, plan a mission real quick, capture some obliques during that mission, and then do a couple orbits around them. There are some other tools such as drone deploy, such as UCGS, that do have other facade type captures that you'll be able to do.
Perfect. Well, Kyle, again, I appreciate you. If anyone has questions for Kyle, kyle.miller@dji.com. Also follow him on LinkedIn. I think that you mentioned a bunch of things you're posting there. And if you're not active in the LinkedIn community, I was resistant for a long time, but I really find it's where you get the best drone news out there. And then if you have any questions for me, Randall at DSLRPros.com. I am very respondent to my emails, so if you have stuff you need, hit me up. But thanks again for being here, Kyle. Thanks again for your time, and we'll do this again soon.
Thank you, Randall, and thank you guys.
Perfect. Take care, guys.